Welcome to Artificiality. This podcast is brought to you by the Artificiality Institute, a nonprofit research organization shaping the human experience in a world of synthetic intelligence. We explore how humans and AI co-evolve through research, design, education, and dialogue, so our future with AI is more meaningful, not just more efficient. You can learn more about the Institute at artificialityinstitute.org. Please consider subscribing to our newsletter to get all of our content delivered to your inbox, and please consider donating to support our work. Our impact depends on the generous support of people like you. Thanks for joining us again on Artificiality. In this episode, we have a conversation with Adam Cutler. Adam has a long career as a distinguished designer at IBM and head of all of their AI design. He's been a participant in our Artificiality community for quite some time. He was on stage at the Artificiality Summit last year, and he will be there again in this October. And he's always a great pleasure to talk to because we always push the limits of where the concepts may or may not go.
Yeah, and I always learned so much from Adam, just having things reframed. He's always got he's such a good storyteller about the way that this really works in the real world. So we talk a lot about the way to think about the future, which is we can't predict it. And there's huge amounts of change coming that will unleash a lot of individual creativity. So we're really excited to bring him back to the summit because he's just so fun.
So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Adam and you enjoy hearing him talk about how he wants to make the future happen and what the change is that he's hoping for. Thank you very much to Adam again for joining us. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with a big question. You've been involved in this AI game, business direction, something for quite a while. Give me a sense of where the industry is in your perspective and where you hope the industry to go in the next few years.
I'm not one for punditry in terms of where things are going to go. And, it's highly unpredictable. I have a collection of Wired magazines in that closet behind this monitor where it's the next big thing and then it never emerges, right? So I don't know that we can predict what comes next at all. I think where we are right now, the way I've been describing it, and it's like a weirdo Adam sort of thing, is we're in the middle of a membrane. The past was on the outside of the membrane. And we're all sort of pushing through the outside of this membrane. We're hey, there's ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or any of these tools that we're all starting to get used to. And the more that we use them, the more our creativity starts to blossom around it. And so we're right in the middle of this membrane where it hasn't quite made its way to every corner of our lives and everything that we do in the same way that, say, mobile or social has. And we don't know where it's going to go when we push through on the other side. So there's some interesting things that come with pushing through on the other side. It's we are in the middle of integrating this into our lives. And I think by and large, it's unconscious or maybe even subconscious, where it's I know there's value in this and I see what I can do with the technology. And then there's what happens if it goes out? If there's an outage for ChatGPT or Claude or any of these things where you can't use it. Are you somehow less than once you've committed to it? What happens if it goes away, or what happens if it's down? And what happens if the corpus of all of the things that you're talking about with an LLM is unavailable to you and you can't just dash something out? And what does life look like when we do have that type of reliance? And is there something that we can do to either temper or prevent that over-reliance where we overfit AI into our lives, where we're just giving over all of these sort of infinitesimal decisions, the minutia of our lives? Is this is too much for me. I'm going to hand it off here and let it make my task list for me, or write that thank you note, or, write the email that I need to send to my boss or something like that. I don't know that we know it ourselves, especially those of us who are using this and thinking about it and building every single day. I think we can see bits and pieces of where it might be going for us. But in the year or two that was leading up to like when social media exploded, everyone kind of forgets, I think, about like Web 2.0 and how that was such a major shift forward. And it was like all of these capabilities that would come together so that we could do something like a Facebook or a Twitter or an Instagram or something like that. And when it happened, everyone was like, oh, this is kind of interesting and cool. And I can take a picture of what I'm eating and post it on the internet, or I can check in on Foursquare and say, like, I'm doing a thing. And nobody really thought about like the privacy implications, the data security, like how much we were actually bleeding out of like, this is who I am, this is where I live, these are my interests, these are the things that define me. And we just sort of openly blew it out all over the internet. And then we all went, oh, maybe it's a bad idea that we did that. Or maybe it wasn't the greatest idea to give our children screens when they were 3 years old and prop up an iPad with big headphones so that they can get through dinner at a restaurant. Like, none of us went into any of this stuff thinking like, that's where we're headed. This is where the promise lies, is in being able to go out to dinner and keep my 3-year-old quiet at the table.
People talk about the harm, the generation that's just growing up with phones, and I think about it, well, as it's their parents that had phones.
Yes.
It's not just the kids, it's the parents. But so what you're talking about there is fascinating to me, because you're saying the sort of classic comparison is you want to still be able to navigate if you lose your GPS. So every now and again, you've got to learn how to read a map. And you were one of the first reviewers of our Chronicle research, of the human adaptation research, and this idea of cognitive permeability, and you take an idea from the AI, and what does it feel like when you become over-reliant on that is kind of what you're pointing out. It's fascinating to me that we now have in front of us some kind of framework for understanding that, one, we're very motivated to outsource hard things that we're not good at. Or that annoy us. So just the evolutionary drive to save energy will mean that the bias to offload is so high. And we're seeing in our research that people have quite significantly different relationships with machines right now, with the AI now, than they did 3 years ago. These are very different. This is a very different archetype. Their identity coupling, the cognitive permeability, the ideas going back and forth, the way you move around this terrain, what it means to not trust it anymore is totally different. What it means when ChatGPT goes down, and people kind of freak out. So I'm really fascinated to hear how you're sort of seeing not so much the future, but the threads of this coming together for individuals.
It's easy to default to all the negative stuff, right? Like over-reliance, and what happens? Are we going to become a bunch of mindless idiots, where, between social media and mobile computing and now AI on top of all of it, are we just going to outsource all of our critical thinking, and do we end up as the fat blobs in WALL-E, right? Like that, there's no shortage of people talking about that, articles being written about it. It's the fear, right? But there's always the flip side to it, right? Like to me, where I'm most interested in is the creativity and the novelty of how people choose to use what's available today, and as they evolve into it. Like, I was making this comparison with somebody the other day, where like the first time anybody picks up like TikTok or Instagram, you're like fumbling around, and you watch like an 11-year-old pick up TikTok, and they're like putting sparkles on it and twisting things around, and it's like they're so comfortable with it, and they know where all the different little doodads live, right? And so right now we're still kind of at that spot where we're all kind of like, what do I do with this thing? Do I take a picture of my food? What do I say underneath this thing? Like, we have not gotten to that point where somebody could even consider being an influencer on something like TikTok or Instagram, the same way with AI. And I think when we're talking about things like creativity and novelty, it's something that you can't swing a dead cat without hitting 25 articles a million articles about this prompt changed my life, 10 ways to get ChatGPT to blah, 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 right? All that stuff. But then there's like the genuinely interesting things that people do with it. And when I say genuinely interesting, I don't necessarily mean world changing, but I mean like, oh, I never would have thought to do that. And part of it is you can write all the blog posts you want and you can do all the podcasts you want. And at the end of the day, it's so personal to what it is that you're trying to do in any given moment. So, one thing that I did that's like the simple bit, but it's also like a quantum leap forward for a lot of people who are just getting their feet wet with LLMs and that sort of thing is like, there was something going on with my dishwasher and it was very specific to the model and all that stuff. And so I opened the door and there's that little sticker that nobody pays attention to that has the model number and the serial number. And I didn't even bother to like line the picture up or anything. I just sort of took the picture and I sent it to ChatGPT and I was like, does this have the feature that kicks the door open automatically because there's a musty smell, blah, blah, blah. I lay out this whole scenario and it goes and it looks at the serial number and the model number and it goes and does all the searching through the instructions. And it's like, okay, your thing doesn't have it, but here's 5 things that you can do to reduce that musty smell, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, okay, I didn't have to Google search and I didn't have to read this. And I certainly didn't have to watch a 5-minute YouTube video where I have to like and subscribe and all that crap. It was, I pointed it at it and it comes back. Then I watch like what my wife Jody does. And so in her spare time, when she's not designing and doing the design thing like we do, she's a potter. And so she makes this beautiful pot, but she does something that's sort of unconventional. There are these like interesting sail bits that go over the top of this sort of otherwise standard vase. And it looks super cool. She sends me a picture of it and I say, this is great. Then like 15 minutes later, she says, check this out. So she took a picture of it and she said, I want you to critique this work as if you were a fine arts professor, pull no punches, tell me exactly what you think, what could be better, and what was done right. And all of a sudden, there's like this host of things that starts flooding into my brain from this one example of how many different things that I do where I'm like, I can fake it. I can sort of fumble around with something, but what if I want to get better? What if I want a genuine critique about what I'm doing? All of a sudden, this is the ultimate feedback machine because it's not worried about hurting my feelings, especially if I'm asking for it. And it's going to do it in a way where, as long as I'm sort of guiding it along, it's going to give me the feedback that I need. And that's like a simple, stupid thing. But the more that we individually use these things, we go, I wish I had a solution to, or I wish I knew, or I wish I didn't have to go looking around, or I need this really quick, or something like that. And then we use the AI in a way that's not necessarily expected for us and then for other people. And there's a virality around that where if I tell you this story, if you're listening to this podcast and you hear this story and you're like, oh man, I didn't think about doing that for myself. And you start doing it, it starts to take on its own form. It starts to, and we're like right at the very beginning of people doing interesting and creative things with it. And we haven't quite gotten to the point where it is like, because we're playing by the old rules in social media, it is the 10 ways you can prompt better. And they're always the same 10 things. And, like after a while, it just starts getting old. But it's when people are really genuinely being creative and novel with the technology. This is where we open everything up. So what I'm super excited about and what I'm looking forward to is not just the doomsaying and like the stuff that's going on where everybody's clutching their pearls about it, but like there's going to be some truly astounding and amazing things. And like the technology is still like what I would call like at the Apple II era of its evolution. Like we are nowhere near the Macintosh, let alone an iPhone, right? So at the very beginning, we're doing amazing things with this fairly narrow version of what AI will eventually become. And now that we're getting taste of agents and things like that, just wait. People will start figuring out new and novel ways to use that. And the benefits that we're all able to reap from it are both at the broad scale, like, hey, we can all do these things now. But I think where this really lies is in the hyper-personalization, that if there is just enough context given to an AI about your personal situation, it can start making those inferences about, hey, these are 5 things that you might be good at, or do you want to try learning this? Or, hey, it seems like you're having trouble with, based on how you learn and based on how you interact with me, can I help, gear this so that it's tailor-made for you and you alone, for me, Adam Cutler, and not for a bunch of people who I fit in some sort of demographic slice, right? So I think there's a lot of promise that people don't necessarily focus as much on. And I would love for the conversation to really take a hard turn towards that kind of talk versus like all the doom saying, like rather than everybody just getting upset about things or worrying about like what's going to happen to my job. Let's talk about like, what are the problems that we can start solving like right now, today?
Yeah, we're totally in with that. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, part of our mission is to try and move that conversation there. We see so much evidence of people having extraordinary different experiences of their own minds because they can access knowledge and practical knowledge in totally different ways. And it goes well beyond just sort of the exploratory learning part. It's actually about creating different things. And there was something that you said that's so interesting to me about the way that these tools are at the moment is the most potent examples are between when someone shares something about what they've done and they share it in such a way that it's not like the old way. It's in a new way of sharing it. And people can immediately place it in their own experience and then think about, well, I wouldn't use it that way, but that's made me think of this. And there's a plasticity and a fluidity with that the tools don't support at the moment because they're text or you've got to download an image and share it or whatever. It's like really just so not fit for purpose for what is, I don't know, the old term would be kind of a community of practice, but being able to share, hey, try this, or this is how I used it.
Yeah, I like your comparison to Apple II. Actually, that would
surprise, surprise.
Yeah, surprise. Go back to 10 to 20, go to 10.
Exactly.
Sort of that. And the other one that I thought that I think about a lot is like being 1996 on the personal side. Just in December of 95, my first product launch was Shockwave, right? And so in 96, what did we have to do? We had to find a way to tell the people in the world that there was this thing that they had to go click on to download, to then figure out what it was to download, to actually have a plugin. And they didn't know what a plugin was, but you had to do all of those things because otherwise all you did is you landed on the mtv.com homepage and there was just an icon that was like, this is broken. It doesn't work. So you have to so there was this entire instruction set that you had to give to people. And then eventually both with the Apple II to the Mac, but then also eventually in the browser world, things just kind of got designed and created and productized in a way that people could start and interact and intuitively engage with what was available. And what I'm curious about, and this is likely much longer conversation than we have time for today, but I'm trying to figure out where you think, like can you see, what do you want to say change? I'm not trying to ask you to predict the next cover of Wired. It's more like, where do you want to see these changes happen to be able to, so that these tools are more intuitive for people to find that answer, to be able to go to there? Because what's difficult is the tools don't really have any like real good, signifiers about what to do, right? But there's also the challenge that we're dealing with an entirely new space of what a machine can do for you and how to communicate with you. So how do you create something where how to access meaning in a machine when that's never been a problem before? Like, it's just such a totally new design challenge.
Something that I have been practicing forever since I started in this space is whenever I'm designing anything, I always start with, what is the flow? What's the nature of things when it's me talking to you, me talking to another person? So I think of this as like, if you had the answer to world hunger, or you had the answer to like, why does this light in my closet keep going out, or something like that. Like, if you had the answer, I wouldn't walk up to you and stare at you expectantly. You would look at me like, what is wrong with this guy? I would say like, hey, do you know a thing or two about electricity, or do you know a thing or two about molecular biology or whatever? And you say, oh, I happen to know a bunch about it. And what do you want to know? And well, how do, so like, we don't ever think twice about like walking up to somebody in a customer service, scenario, or if we're like at the library or something like that, where we're asking something of somebody else, right? So I see the whole problem space, at least interface wise, as behavioral migration. We have become intellectually neutered or trained is probably the better way to say it, intellectually trained to type our Google queries in a very specific way, right? Like we've learned over the past 20 years, like you say it like this, you type it like this, and there's operators and Boolean stuff and all that stuff. So we've all learned a language, and we're like, I've learned this language and I know this language, and it gets me close enough on the first page of search results. And, Google does its thing to try to make that as good on their end as possible. We don't know, or people who are uncomfortable sitting down in front of an LLM, like a blank screen, like here's the prompt line, they actually know what they want to ask. They just feel weird about it. It's like I talked about this phenomena when I did my TED Talk, when there was the Pepper robot in the lunchroom, and it had been infused with Watson technology. And I was like, I've waited my whole life for this moment. And I went to go check it out, and it was like asleep. And I finally poked it awake, and it sort of turned its head all creepy and did like a, weird wave at me. And I just stood up and walked away. And I got back to my desk, and I was like, why did I have this totally negative response to something I've been waiting for my entire life? And it was, I didn't know what to say to the thing, but like, common sense went out the window. I should have said, hi, my name's Adam, right? Duh. But like, because it wasn't another human being, like there was a part of my brain that short circuited. And so when you have like a chat window with like a prompt line at the bottom and it says, hello, Adam, like if I'm not comfortable, then I don't know what to type. So like, I've heard people, I've watched people say like, I don't know what to say to it. I'm like, what do you mean you don't? It's like, it's the universal answer box. Say anything. Just be like, yo, what's up? Or like, hey, I'm trying to fix this. Or can you tell me about whatever? So to me, that means we have to migrate our behavior, or specifically as designers, we have to help people migrate their behavior. So if they're used to doing Google searches, how do we migrate them to natural language? Because there really isn't, maybe like direct mind input, which we're nowhere near. Sure, there's like things like Neuralink or whatever, but like natural language is the easiest way to get what you want. But you also start to realize that a design problem with natural languages is that people are like disastrously imprecise with what they ask for. I know I asked for that, but not like that. How come you didn't read my mind, right?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't mean it that way. Well, but you said it that way, and yeah.
Let's study married couples for that.
Yeah. So I do think a big part of this that will help, and it's like so small and stupid, but nobody has done this yet. None of them do this, which is, all of them wait for the human to initiate the first turn. I have to type something in before it does anything. But if I walk up to you, you're going to say, hey, what's going on? How you been? Or whatever, right? Like, we don't just look at somebody. I guess there's the Gen Z gaze or whatever they call that thing. But like, we don't generally just like stare at somebody waiting for them to say something to us. We initiate, and it's natural, right? So if we can get these tools, this tech, to start by saying, hi, this is blah, 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 and then there's the recognition of, is this your first visit or are you returning? Did you leave in the middle of something and do you want to pick it up? But to get what you want, to simply ask for it in the language that we ask for from everybody about everything all day long, that we never give it a second thought, human to human. Okay, so what are the little cues that we're missing, right? A machine can't smile and have that little sparkle in their eye that they're happy to see you, and they can't nod when you're saying something that it agrees with, because they don't agree with you. It's just statistically pumping out the next token, right? So how do you deliver the illusion that it's sticking its hand out metaphorically, shaking it and being like, what are we going to do today? And where would you like to start? And if you don't know where, I can help you get started. I think that as like, it's a stupid little speed bump, but a lot of people trip and fall over on that little speed bump because they're like, I don't know what to say, right? Versus, hey, I'm talking to you and you're prompting me. I mean, I could have started this podcast and you guys could have stared at me until I said something, but you have topics that you want to talk about. You have questions you want to ask me. So, you say hello and you introduce me or whatever, and then you ask me a question and then we start talking. Like, that's as commonplace as anything in our lives, period. But none of us who have been working on these tools so far have thought like, hey, we should probably build that part in there, right? We're just interested in like, can we minimize the hallucinations, and are there guardrails there? And like, there's like all the safety things, and there's the personality stuff, and it's too friendly. Now it's not friendly enough. It's too clinical. Everybody is experimenting because there are no answers, right? And I know that I've talked to both of you about this at some point in the past, and I may have even said it at last year's summit, where I believe we're in this mini singularity. Like everyone talks about the big Kurzweil singularity. We're living through it right now. None of us can predict what happens next. Like agents are starting to go live in ChatGPT. So, set your watches for, 10 better ways to run an agent blog posts, flooding everything that you look at soon. But like, what do people do with each step forward is going to be exponential in terms of what comes after it, because it's going to lead to things that we just couldn't do before that next capability gets slotted in to whatever it is that we're doing. So the reason I think it's the mini singularity is there is no predicting. Like there's going to be some Cambrian explosion, like probably within the next 3 years, where conceivably life as we know it gets turned upside down, because a lot of the institutions that we rely on will no longer be necessary. A lot of the customs that we do will no longer be necessary. What those are, how that's going to play out, I have no idea. And does some of that terrify me? Absolutely. But is there plenty to get excited about, especially when it comes to things like healthcare, government, democracy, education, the things that actually augment us, that make us better, make us smarter. And what's AI's role going to be in that? Well, we can already see the beginnings of it starting to poke its head through, but I think we can't predict it. In the same way that you couldn't have predicted what came after Facebook when Facebook came around, right? Twitter showed up roughly in the same time frame, but they were two very different things, and everyone was sort of like, well, this is an odd, curious little thing, and so yeah, I'll put my pictures in it, right? Like, we don't know what's going to be the next big thing. ChatGPT was definitely the first shot across the bow. What comes next? I don't know that we know, but I do know that if we don't keep humanity in the center of whatever these things are, there's some bad things that are going to happen. So I think for those of you, especially who are listening to this podcast, this is our prime responsibility, is to constantly think about how does the human stay at the center and not this satellite where the LLM or whatever it is, is doing what it does. And I'm just sort of like waiting for it to spit out its response so I can turn around and give it to somebody else. It's like, how many times have you heard some version of this joke where it's like, I'm going to write a 30-page paper. So I throw a bunch of bullets into an LLM and it spits out the 30-page paper, and I go through and I edit and massage and make it just right. And then I send it off, and then you get it and you're like, this is way too long. 30 pages? I'm never going to read this. And you throw it right back into an LLM and you say, summarize this. It's like, we're doing this to each other.
Colossal waste of energy.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed wasting all those bottles of water, because, I don't have time to watch a 5-minute video, or I don't have the patience is probably the better way to state that mentality. Like, 2.5 minutes, that's way too long. So you throw it into an LLM, you say, summarize what these people are talking about, right? In some cases, it's great because you skip all the other fluff and filler that they fill these videos with, and you get the straight bullet. But we're also spending a ton of time making content that everyone else is going to be like, yeah, I don't know what to do with this. Summarize it for me. Right. So there's a weird set of things that are happening that I don't think any of us have it reconciled yet or fully understand it.
No, and I like the image that popped in my mind when you're saying we're just here to take it from one machine and hand it to another person or something. Is like the people in the Amazon warehouses that have to be there to take the stuff off of the conveyor belts to be able to slot it into the right thing, because the irregular shaped boxes and so forth don't go onto the shelves of the thing that then gets pushed around by a robot. But it's just that one thing, because our hands are more accomplished than any robot for some period of time. And I know we have to call Ken Goldberg and ask him when he thinks we might actually be able to grip things for real. But you sort of get shoved into this state of being the one that can connect what's capable by machines. Right. So those machines are really good at running things down a conveyor belt, and they're really good at moving the big trays onto the next station, but they can't move the packages from one to another very effectively. So the human is stuck doing just what the machine can't do. I understand exactly how that happened is in an Amazon warehouse, but I might get a comment that I'm out of date on some of this, by the way. It's been a while since I've actually looked at those things. But the premise is still the same. We want to keep the human at the center. We don't want the human to be the one that actually just connects the machines and the things that the machine can't do. Right?
Yeah.
We want it to actually be going the other direction for us.
Yeah. We end up being switchboard operators. How may I help you? You're Lily Tomlin sticking plugs into a big switchboard, right?
Hopefully with that amount of humor.
Yeah. I mean, the point of this should be to make us smarter, not dumber. Yeah. There's no question about that.
But that requires intentionality. And I also think this is something that I don't think people are ignoring, but I do think that we could be a whole lot more intentional about being intentional. Like sitting down and thinking about what the purpose behind whatever it is that we're about to set out to do really holds. Like, is it purposeful? Like there's a lot of stuff out there saying like the internet is on its way to being ruined because there's a bunch of people who are like just flooding it with AI slop because they want to get the ad impressions from the viral pass around of some 5-minute piece of garbage clip that an AI spits out, right? So if that becomes everything, how do you actually find that which means something to you, something that connects with you or something that helps you, augments you, versus like a bunch of garbage that's just ultimately disposable and environmentally irresponsible as well?
Yeah. What do you think the answer to that is? I mean, we're part of how we think about that is, I'm not trying to sound at all old school here. It's really just more that finding your community and finding the things that are relevant to you. Part of it is finding the actual people themselves. And I mean, that's part of what the summit's about, right? Meeting and being in person, because then you get this real depth that gives you a different amount of context, so that when you're finding the next layer, it's not necessarily a hands-on, old-school organic process, that you can use these tools, that you can use other ways of accessing that extra knowledge that you want, or the different communities. But I'm curious as to sort of how you see the finding of things now.
Well, I think part of it is going to be obviated. Like, we won't have to find things anymore. I'm just going to set up an agent to say, go find me 10 really smart, engaging people that I can talk to AI about, or talk about AI with, right? Or I need to find people who are like crazy into playing a certain style of guitar or something like that. It's going to go find it for us. We're not going to have to go search for it. In fact, in many ways, it might end up being better, because I'm looking for a very specific set of people. And if you think about and use and leverage what we already know about social networks, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, any of these things, is like you immediately start getting recommended other people that you might know, especially if you give it your address book or your contacts or whatever. Like, it's going to be able to draw out of that. Like, there are people that know people that want to talk about the thing that you want to talk about. So I think in one sense, our ability to just like hitch up our pants and go try to find something, do something, is going to change, right? It depends on how it's handled, but in some cases it may weaken our ability to actually do the foraging ourselves, because we just have a million little agents that are all running around doing what we're asking them to do, because I'm too busy to go find this myself, or it's too difficult to find this myself. So it's going to go do it for you. And I think the other thing that is critically important as we evolve in the very short term is we have had our sixth sense of curiosity beaten out of us. Like the educational system beats it out of us, right? Like our educational system is based on the industrial model. It's like you have 45 minutes to learn math. The teacher is motivated to get through it because if they don't finish their thing, then you can't take the state test and blah, 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 right? So all of that to say, we have opportunities with this to, one, get what we are actually looking for. But two, I think you have to cultivate curiosity. And when we've all been trained to have the answer, you put your hand up, you open your mouth when you have the answer. If you have a question, put your hand down. Shut up, Cutler. You're going to make us late. We're going to blow our plan. Like, you're always asking questions. We've all heard these things from our peers over the course of time. And it doesn't stop when you graduate and go to work. You sit in a meeting in a corporate boardroom, and if you're the one asking questions, you're the uninformed one, not I'm the one who has the answer. But increasingly, as we can put our trust and our faith in AI for a number of things, it's an answer box. It has all the answers statistically and then trained into it and consumed, because we know all these big companies are basically feeding off of the internet as a whole, right? So it's all in there. That means the people who ask the best questions are the ones who get to find the things that they want. And that's a skill for a lot of us that's atrophied. And so I think part of it is, how do we help to reconstruct, as a part of that behavioral migration, how do we help to reconstruct people's curiosity? Because that's how you actually find things, is you're driven. I wonder if I could, if you're outdoors and you're, an adventurer, you're like, I wonder if I can ski off that cliff. And then you throw yourself off the cliff and you land and you live, or you don't, right? When it comes to intellectual pursuits or things that are knowledge-based, it's like we say, I wonder if I could, and then we turn our attention back to the TV or driving our kids to school or whatever it is that preoccupies our mind, and then we forget about it, or, oh, that seems like it's a lot of work, or I don't want to pay the people who can really find that sort of stuff for me. And all that's going to go away. So now it's back to, can you ask the right questions? Do you have the curiosity to go find the people? Because the tools and the technology are going to make it easier than ever, especially if you volunteer yourself. Like, I don't want to be found if it has to do with any of these things that are personal to me. But if it's about like being smart about AI, or, I'm a really good finance person or whatever, like, you're going to put yourself out there in the same way that you put yourself out on LinkedIn. Find me for these reasons. Leave me alone for the rest of them, right? So I think it'll be interesting to see. There'll be a business space. There'll be, a series of companies that optimize themselves around this particular thing, finding you the right match about whatever it is, right? Whether it's something intellectual or the dinner that you want to have at the fancy restaurant in the city that you're visiting, et cetera.
Trying to remember, but I can't at the moment. There's a great, I think it's Richard Saul Wurman quote. We have it in some of our presentations about the education system teaching us answers, but the real skill is asking the right question.
That's right.
He said it better, and I wish I could quote it.
I think I have that book somewhere. Here.
There you go. Yep, there you go. And it's very much true. I mean, that's what we're getting to, and it sort of circles back to what you're saying at the beginning. Is you open up these tools, and there's a window, and you're not really sure what to do. Well, because we haven't, we sort of lost some of that capability, or it's been drummed out of us that you approach a machine with a question, in that way. The only structured thing we do is search, but you only put in a few keywords and maybe some quotation marks. And if you're really like Boolean, woof, boy, that's been a while, but you're not actually just stopping and going, here's kind of what I'm thinking about. And I'm not really sure how can I do, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's also why Reddit thrives. They call it like the front door of the internet or the heart of the internet. But it's one of those things that, like, if you're not a Reddit user, you're like aware of it. It's over there. And some people will say it's the worst place on earth. It's just filled with the worst miscreants and terrible people. But like, if you want to learn how to do something, how to fix something, where you can find something, other people have had that experience. And instead of combing through a bunch of websites that have gone through SEO and there's a whole bunch of stuff to like get ad impressions.
Yeah, and then the pop-up because they've got to have a video of showing them making the cupcake as opposed to just having the friggin' recipe.
Exactly. All you're looking for one sentence out of a paragraph that says push the red button. That was all you needed, right? So like the hoops that we have to jump through, we won't maybe have to jump through those hoops, or we'll jump through other hoops, I suppose. But it's the nature of all this is going to change. And this is very similar. Like if this were like 1993, 92, and you'd maybe seen like your very first web page, but like there was like 100 or 400 web pages total on the internet, you'd be like, well, I have some ideas. And then like it takes years of evolution to get there. And the question is, with this technology, is it going to be years or months? Both, really, right? Like there's going to be these huge waves of innovation that come off of the back of what just got introduced today. But as this is being introduced today and everybody's doing all these amazing things, there's somebody else who's like, but what comes past the LLM, right? What's next? And then those things will spawn their own, but they won't ignore everything that we've been doing. It'll be mushed together. And so all these capabilities will slowly assemble themselves. But to us, it's going to feel like this happened overnight. But if you look back to like when you were first exposed to the internet and where we are today, like there's so much we take for granted, and you go back like 10 years and like maybe a quarter of what you take for granted wasn't there 10 years ago. Maybe half of it, if you go back another 2 years past that, like we forget how long it takes, but it also feels like it happens overnight.
Yeah, well, you go back to the beginning of the internet. We weren't searching. We're navigating through a catalog.
Yes.
Because that's what that's what it was originally structured as a library. And when you tell people, our kids who are this, that's how the internet was organized, it's just kind of like you can't even get your head around. How would you have actually like organized all of the pages of the internet? I mean, it wasn't everything, but it was quite a lot of them, and you're like, well, and you navigated like you went to the library when you were going to go look for a book. When you what? I mean,
the point is so well taken on a number of levels, right? Like how many things are we doing today that 3 years from now we'll be like, remember we used to like listen to podcasts or make podcasts, or like who does podcasts? It's like so many different things change in such a short period of time. And it feels like in the 2 years or 3 years or 5 years since something first showed up and then what it evolves into, it feels like forever. And then if you're asked like, well, what was life like before it? Like sometimes you're like, I can't honestly remember what it was like. I know there was something, but this is what we have right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today. We're very excited to see you soon. I don't know what word I'm trying to search for there, in October. So, but thank you so much. It's been a really great conversation.
Thanks for having me. And I cannot wait to get out there for the summit. I have said this many times in many different places, but last year's summit was hands down like one of the very best experiences I've ever had, conference-wise or whatever, that the people who were there, the topics of conversation, and just all of it made it so worthwhile. It was so lovely, and I'm stoked to make it out there again. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Can't wait to have you.
Thank you.